Hogtown F.O.O.L.S. I'm Mike Langford. I'm the president of the group. We've decided that due to not being able to do hands-on training for a little bit, we continue to do some of these presentations, back to basic stuff. This is the first in a line of about 3 weeks we're going to be going, and then see what carries on from there. So this is advanced auto X size up, and we're going to be using Chad Roberts is going to be the main presenter for the day. And then after this, he's going to do his presentation, and then we'll open it up for everybody for questions, and we'll discuss things at that time. I also will have the chat board up, so we'll take any kind of questions via chat as well. Okay, so anyhow, I'm going to turn it over to Chad, and Chad will carry on. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming on a beautiful day today. All right, so to you, Chad.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Mike. Yeah, first up, everyone, Chad Roberts. I just want to thank Mike, Rob, Dave, the rest of the executive for Hogtown F.O.O.L.S for having me on. It's quite the honor to be on. Obviously, I'm glad that I've been able to come on and at least share a little bit of what I can pass on to everyone. What we're going to talk about today is advanced auto X size up and modern considerations. Just something I've been kind of throwing together the last couple of years, and this is just ever since doing all of the Auto X team and related stuff that I do where I work. Over the years, you kind of develop and learn from different people all over the world, which is awesome. And you kind of tweak things just like we do with anything else we do in our job. So what I've done here is just try to simplify our size up a little with a really common, like a really easy approach. It's kind of a two-part approach. So we'll go through that a little bit. And that's probably the main part of this is really more of the size up. I'm not going to get a lot into specific cuts and moves and things like that because we'll get to that point too in this presentation that there's a lot of different reasons why I don't like to dive into things very specifically because of the different types of scenes we're going to deal with. So a lot of that will, dictate what we're going to do. So we'll touch on a little bit of everything. So, we'll dive right into it. I don't want to take too much of everyone's time. It is a really nice day. I'm real happy that everyone was able to come on. Like I said, I really appreciate your time. So we'll dive right into it right now. So let's see if I can get this moving. Just me, myself, I'm an open book kind of guy. I'm with Oakville Fire, if anyone doesn't know who I am. Been on there about 13 years. I was on the heavy rescue for about 5 before I got promoted. Now an acting captain for about 3+ years. Worked downtown, which is a great experience. Not just on the heavy rescue, but from an acting captain standpoint, it really kind of changed my view the last couple of years in terms of the size up principles and how we approach a lot of things, not just Auto X. So I've been a member of our Auto X team for about 10 years now, a little over 10 years. Probably run our team for about 5 or 6 years now. We have always had a great group. And this is what kind of got me into this from the get-go when I first got hired was getting into the Auto X teams and kind of expanding from there. Guys like John Holkovich and Mark Acochello that got us into these programs and kept them going for so long. And now I've just been kind of able to keep going what they got going for us. So Turk Canada member. So I'll talk a little bit about Turk at the end, what they do. It kind of goes into a hand in hand with training and how we can get ourselves more involved in the Auto X world. I'm a regional judge with them right now as well. Right with Canadian Firefighter Magazine. I don't know if anyone's seen my stuff there. I think it's a quarterly magazine. Just try to share pretty basic stuff and simple stuff that you can bring back to your hall or bring back to the street and help you out a little bit. And current member of Canadian Motorsport Response Team. So I do a lot of the work with them for their extrication teams. They do anything from the APC series to Indy to F1. They do all the Canadian Motorsport Response Teams. So it's been also another great experience. Just a whole different idea in terms of, you want to talk about vehicle technology. What we're seeing on the streets is great, but what they're doing in racing is like 10 years ahead of what we're doing. So that's kind of what I really like about that side of it, is that you're kind of looking into the future a little bit into what we're going to see in terms of, different material like carbon fibers that are coming out and everything. It's just unreal, right? So, that's enough about me. So let's just dive into this. So we're going to talk about simplifying your size up to modern extrication, right? So we're going to go through that. That's going to be the main portion. It's a step-by-step process. It is 2-phase. It'll make more sense as we go through each step. There's 5 steps in it. before we dive into it too much, I don't want to just say it's just for AutoX. I was talking to him like a little bit before. Is this is also really useful with a lot of tech rescue if you break it down. It doesn't. It's kind of like your RECOVS for fires scenes. I know a lot of people use tons of different stuff, but let's just say RECOVS for fire scene size up and how you're going to address your main issues on scene is, this you can use for a lot of tech rescue. It's not just for AutoX, but we're going to kind of break it down that way today. Modern vehicle hazards we're going to touch on, alternative fuel responses. There's tons of them out there. We're not even going to go crazy into it. I look at myself as, through all the people that I've met and trained and with over the years, is that I'm kind of more like a GP of AutoX, a general practitioner. I'm not an expert at any of this. I just have a decent Rolodex that if you've got questions afterwards that I can't answer, I can hopefully guide you in the right direction towards someone who can. We'll talk a little bit about upgraded SRS systems and other safety systems and how to deal with them, just real quick too as well. Advanced ultra high strength steels, why they're there, not just for patient safety. We'll kind of talk a little about why they're there and where they're going in the future too as well. We'll talk about preloading a little bit too. And for those who don't know, who haven't read some of my stuff, we'll dive into that real quick as well. And that kind of goes hand in hand with advanced and ultra high strength steels. Back to basics approach. So then we'll kind of end off with that, because with what we're seeing and with all advanced and ultra high strength steels and some of the SRS and safety systems we're putting in vehicles today, and what we're seeing is getting back to a basics thing is kind of where we need to go. I think we've kind of gotten a little fancy over the last 10 years, and I think we kind of have to step back a little bit, and it will help us in the long run. So so here's our size up. We'll dive right into this. This is kind of what I've developed over the years. I actually kind of picked it up through an extrication team out of Seattle called Pulley Up. Probably pronouncing it wrong, but they had this idea first. I don't know if it was the exact same, but I've just kind of expanded on it a little bit and just kind of tweaked it a little bit with a lot of things that we do, right? So we have our size up, we have our hazards, access, disentangle, extricate, right? We're going to dive into each one of these right away, right off the get-go. So in terms of the two parts, we'll talk a little bit about that too as well, right? So everything kind of on the one side of the screen is your size up, and the other side is our stabilize. So the reason I break this down to two things is because there is a lot going on. And the first part is kind of more the more important side of it. So for our size up, from an IC standpoint, you're going to be looking at, numbers of vehicles involved, patients, obviously, their location and orientation is very important in terms of your extrication planning, immediate hazards, stuff that's going to hurt us more than anything, and types of vehicles involved, because obviously with our hybrid electric, our hydrogen, our propane, that's all got to kind of weigh in about how we're going to deal with these vehicles. It's not even just types of vehicles involved in terms of alternate fuel source. It also has to do a lot with the new modern technology. So if I know I've got an Audi, I've got an A8 or something, or, I've got a high-end Mercedes, or even a Volvo or things like that, like just knowing the type of vehicles and what they're made of. And I'm not saying that some of the vehicles, on the lower end, like the Dodge Caravans, aren't built strong. They really are. But I think that gives you a heads up right away, not only to the type of steel you might be dealing with in some of these nicer vehicles, but the safety systems that are put in place as well too. So if you hear my dog barking in the background, that's my dog. So she likes to bark at everyone. So outside of that, after your initial considerations as an IC, those are your four things you're looking for right away. Your hazards, your number of vehicles, patients, and the types of vehicles, and trying to identify any alternative sources, right? Immediate priorities. After that is our risk critical issues. So immediate attention, that's our fire or unresponsive patient. If we have a fire situation that we can't contain right away, or we know that's going to be a problem for us, we need to get into an immediate extrication situation. And what we'll talk about in terms of those different levels of how we're going to, classify our patients' conditions when we get there. So risk critical issues, fire, unresponsive patients. Next to be our assistance that we're going to need. This is before you get on scene, really, more than anything. If we know we've got, let's say any type of transport vehicle involved, possible underrides, whatever you're using for heavy tow, or if you don't know who you're using for heavy tow, definitely get to know who they are. Some of the work we've done over the last couple of years with some of these heavy tow companies, they're unbelievable. The capabilities they have are beyond what we can even imagine. So get to know who they are, and so if you need assistance, sometimes just have them called out, right? If I know we've got a transport involved on the highway in an incident, have dispatch start rolling them right away, because they're going to have to get there anyways to possibly tow the transport away. So why not have them responding already? Can always cancel them. It's like anything else we call, is you might as well have them coming, because sometimes they take half hour minimum to get to where you're going, even with a police escort. So think about that kind of assistance. So don't just think about, oh, well, how many more trucks do I need? Think beyond that. Think hazardous materials. Do you need a hazmat crew? You can go down the line, right? So those are one of your immediate priorities. Next is vehicle relocation. This is kind of a hot topic thing that's finally kind of getting clarified. Vehicle relocation, when I first came into AutoX, was not even thought of, right? It was a no-go right away. Always has been. Vehicle relocation now, with the assistance of a medic inside the vehicle or firefighter to manually stabilize our patient, is very much a real thing. Because some of the situations we get into, this is our best way to get someone out, is to possibly relocate them from a Jersey barrier, or to relocate the vehicle from underneath a transport, to actually facilitate an easier and quicker extrication, right? I mean, to think that moving a vehicle a few inches or a foot or two while they're being manually stabilized is going to be detrimental to their health. No, it's time. It's time that's going to be detrimental. So let's not waste it, right? But we won't dive too much into those as much as well. Provide immediate access for medic. Like I said, that's huge. How we're going to get them in, identify a good point to get them in, because as we go through this, you're going to see that we really need to identify patient entrapments and what kind of situation we have on the inside of the vehicle before we really make a lot of our plans. So, like I said, those are our initial IC considerations and priorities. I know it seems like a lot. It's a lot to kind of take in, but it's fairly simple when you really break it down. You're really just looking for vehicles, patients, hazards, and who you need help with, right? And how you're going to get help to your patient. From a stabilization standpoint, I always look at stabilization as very fluid. However, you want to get that initial stabilization right away. And really, I look at it as simple as just chalking the wheels. I know where I work is we kind of carry step chocks with us all the time. And right as you're going up to deal with a patient who may be in the interior vehicle, you chalk the wheels as you're talking to them. It's just more for our safety, especially when we get into some of the quieter electric vehicles, and even some of the engines they're putting in, the gasoline engines now. They're very, very quiet. So it's hard to tell if they're running, not running. And all it takes is them to take their foot off foot off the brake, foot on the gas. They're not in park yet. So until we can get an interior stabilization of our vehicle, which involves putting the car in park and taking the keys out, we don't even have that yet. So chalk the wheels, identify that, or eliminate that problem right away. So chalk it right as you come in. Primary stabilizations, like I said, they can be simple as step chocks, wedges, 6x8s and wedges, whatever your department uses. It really doesn't matter. Or it can be as simple as manual stabilization. If we need a medic in right away, or a firefighter in right away, and that's our primary concern, is to find out what's going on. Sometimes, you got a vehicle on its side or a vehicle on its roof, is just a couple firefighters with a little bit of strength just to stabilize that vehicle, just to make sure it's safe for them to get in. I mean, in the AutoX competition world, that's not really acceptable. But when it gets out onto the street a little bit, these are acceptable risks to take sometimes. So it can be as simple as just something like that. But ideally, your simple primary stabilization is your step chocks, your wedges, your 6x8s, whatever is used. When you get into secondary, that's when we get into adding it in as we go. This is something it's fluid. It's always moving more and more and more. You're going to be talking about your struts, your ratchets, your airbags, things like that we're going to use for our stabilization for something that's a little more precarious. But it's not something that it's like right away it needs to be done. This is something that you're maybe going to have one firefighter or two firefighters are going to address this ongoing throughout the incident. The only time I would say something might be a little bit that might not work as well is you go to something like our next, this one here. This was on the 401, I think, the other day. I can't remember where I got this photo from, but think about this scene as something that, without the door removed, think about this as your primary situation. You don't this might be something where we don't want to be throwing people in the vehicle right away. You can make patient access from the outside of the vehicle, or sorry, patient contact. You can kind of address what's going on. This might be something you want to start thinking about, some ratchet straps or some struts, initially. Reason for that being is that this is a safety issue. If we start moving some weight around in there, we add a firefighter or two into this vehicle, this thing might go a different sideways on us or backwards on us. So these are the only ones that, maybe that secondary stabilization you want to address it right away. But initially, primary stabilization, like you said, just keep it simple and get your medic access or your firefighter access, and then move into into your secondary, which will be an ongoing situation. So that's kind of our first acronym. That's our size up and our stabilization. Two very important things to keep us going. I'll kind of stop a little bit as we go here. I think there's a bit of I'll try to keep an eye on questions too. I know, Mike, you're doing the same thing. So if there's something that I'm missing, just let me know. Cut me off here. I know I'm talking a lot.
We're doing good. Okay.
All good. Okay, perfect. Next one here, hazards and hose line. Hazards is our most important, obviously. Those are pretty quick, easy. Fire, fluids, alternative fluids, hydro, traffic, secondary vehicles, interior vehicle hazards. That could be anything from drug related, weapon related, anything really, you name it. You see some random stuff in people's cars, and especially in the trunks. That's something that we got away from a long time ago. But remember, if you got a really good wreck going on, you're gonna be there for a while. You're popping the hoods anyways. Maybe pop the trunk, have a look at what you got. I know down in the U.S., some of the brothers and sisters who train with down there, that's kind of that's a normal thing for them to be popping trunks, make sure they're not getting into something that they shouldn't be. And sometimes too, it's not a bad idea in terms of identifying alternative fuels, because a lot of the propane tanks in some of these propane powered vehicles is actually hidden in the trunk. So if they're not identified properly, or whatever they were identified with, usually they're like a little white sticker or blue stickers sometimes in the bottom corner. Those things will fall off pretty quick too. So if you're gonna be somewhere for a while, if you're popping the hood anyways to do the battery, make sure you maybe pop that trunk too. Just have a look at what you got. You never know what you're going to get in there, right? Okay, so that's our hazards. Obviously, that's as an IC, your size up your hazards. Hose line, at minimum, I always look at it as is bring an extinguisher with you. Have your driver bring it. Have your driver set up your scene. Have them bring up, once they've made the scene safe in terms of a parking and cone situation, have them bring up at least an extinguisher bare minimum. It's real easy to bring that up and bring it back. We get some of the simple stuff that we kind of forget to do, and I'm not saying we're too lazy to do it, but some stuff we just don't pull off our trucks and we never think to. It's like, man, just bring that extinguisher and drop it down beside the car. If something ever happens, we can at least knock it down real quick, right? Rule of thumb though, if you're pulling tools off the truck, whether it be for stabilizing or for extrication, you should be pulling at least a dry hose line or charged trash line, whatever your department SOPs dictate, right? But just keep that in mind. If you're pulling all the tools off, make sure that hose line is getting pulled off too, right? We just want to protect ourselves, protect our patient, possibly any medics in the vehicle. It's our job to be, that's our scene. We got to protect everyone, right? Long duration incidents is a minimum for hose lines. You're going to be there for over 30 minutes and some serious. Think about having that hose line out. Hazard mitigation, that could be as simple as you said. It could be a fire scene. It could be a fluid situation. You gotta mitigate with a hose line, with whether it be a runoff situation. So there's more stuff you can use a hose line for than just fire protection, right? Spills cleanup, things like that. So hazards hose line are pretty simple. We'll dive into our let's see what we got here. Our access. So we get into our A, which is our access and our assess our patient. Right off the bat, patient considerations, like we talked about earlier. Number of patients is key, because that'll give us an idea what we're going to need for EMS on scene. Do we need more than one ambulance? Do we need multiple? Do we have a mass casualty situation? We don't know, right? Mass casualty is a pretty small number depending on how your department looks at it. So just think about that too as well, what you can handle and how you handle those scenes. So number can be very important. It can turn a small scene into a real big scene. And I don't know if you guys saw that one in Texas last week. Well, I don't know how many, was it 20 something kids or something, in a pickup truck down, and I don't even know if the number's right, but it was just astounding, right? Like, and I mean, we were all kids and crazy at one point, but I mean, how do you fit 20 something kids into a car? But there's a good, identifier right there. So think about the number of patients you have right away. Location and orientation in the vehicle. This is why it's important to look at this is, think about a patient as having a plunger on their head, and you want that plunger, the tip end of that plunger to stay as straight as possible in that, that 0 degree position of where they're coming out, that inline situation. So, can we deviate off that? Yes, we can. But let's think about the location and orientation they're in and how we can get them out in that situation, in line. Is there a hole there, or how do we make a hole to get them out there? Or is it something that we're going to have to deviate off? And it's not written in stone, but just think about location and orientation in the vehicle. Is it a rollover situation and their head is now facing the back rear passenger door? Okay, maybe it is. Now that's where we're thinking about. Let's get away from the driver's side and start thinking about the other side, because that's the side we want to come out. So just little things like that, right? So number, location, and orientation. And really, more importantly than a lot of them is entrapments. And that's why it's really important to get someone in the vehicle right away, or at least someone really close to our patient to at least be able to assess the situation, is entrapments, because that's our number one concern, is interior entrapments and medical condition. Because if something goes wrong and we're doing a rear door with a full side out move, I know everyone knows all the terms and all that, but I know a few of you do, and we have a footwell entrapment, what good is it going to do for me to be working on a back door when I haven't addressed my interior patient entrapments? Those are the number one priorities. So if we have footwell entrapments, arm entrapments, it may even be something where we need to do some cross ramming on the inside of the vehicle, get a ram in there and push the vehicle out off on top of them. That's our immediate priority. It's not popping doors and, and trying to figure out how to make this massive opening. It's identifying those little things, because if they crash on us and they're trapped, then how are we getting them out, right? So think about that too as well. So let that drive a lot of let that drive your overall extrication plan as well. Okay, so that's your access. So that's our important reason of why we want to access our patient, assessing our patient. Read your rec. I saw a bad one today. I think it was last night in Barrie. I think they had one, and they wrapped a transfer pickup around a light standard pretty good. So read your rec and what you have. I know vehicles are built to crumple and just kind of protect our patient the best we possibly can, but speed is the ultimate factor. Things like kinetics and the study of kinetics, what a lot of these doctors are doing, and they're doing a lot with Formula One and Indy, is that speed is a huge thing. Is that, if they're going fast, I don't care if they're the nicest car going, man, like they are going to be in some world of hurt. Just the internal forces of their body, banging up against this internal organs is huge. So just understand, when you see something that looks really bad, it's probably pretty bad, right? So don't just assume that just because they're out walking around or they're doing fine, say, they're okay. Say, no. If it looks bad, they're hurting. They just don't know it yet, and you get into shock and everything else, right? Level of consciousness, obviously, that's a huge thing for us in terms of how deep we're going to go into terms of packaging and things like that. Like if they don't remember what happened, or if they lost consciousness at some point, or if they're unconscious, obviously that's a major concern. But if they maybe lost consciousness at some point, that's now a major concern, something that we want to pass on to our medics, because that's when you get into C-spine questioning and how deep they get into how they want to package patients. That's kind of one of their number one things is their consciousness level. So obviously with our questioning, our ABCs, NRD, whether it be drugs, defib, however you want to look at that, those are pretty basic things. As you're talking to them, they're doing okay, but you want to assess their breathing. You want to get a good baseline for our medics before they get there. Let them know what's going on. Time is huge. One of the guys I dealt with a while ago was writing an article. He's a firefighter in GTA as well. Mike Tazarski. He's a real good guy. He's very, very smart. And one of the big things he told me was time. I know we talk about the golden hour in the 20 minutes, and that's kind of gone by the wayside with some people, but really just have an internal clock, just like you're at a fire, right? Like it's, when you get a par, whether it be 15, 20 minutes, whatever your department works on, and your dispatch might queue you for a par, you almost want to think about that in terms of our rescue scenes, is that time is huge. And the more time that we're wasting is really detrimental for our patient. You can make the biggest hole and the best scene look good, but if we're not getting our patient out of the vehicle, the best spot for them, no matter what, every time, is always in an emergency room operating table, if that's what they need. Being in the car, it's not good for them. It's never a good situation. The quicker we can get them out, the better. Obviously, we want to think about orientation and best extrication plans, things like that, but always have that internal time clock as an IC in the back of your mind. If it seems like it's taken a while, it's taken a while. It's probably is. And whether you got to watch a stopwatch, whether you call dispatch and tell them to give you a a 15, 20-minute timer, because they'll do it. And sometimes that's the best way to look at it is if you're on a rescue scene is ask for a 20-minute countdown. And if they give you, if you're not where you want to be in 20 minutes or maybe less, is you might want to start thinking about that, right? So, there's your assessing your patient. Well, we'll go through time a little bit in a minute. Keeping them warm. This is another Mike Tazarski. He taught me a little bit about this, or at least introduced me to this theories. And I won't get into it because it's really, I wouldn't say really in depth, but it'll take too much time. But the triad of trauma, if you have time, look it up on YouTube. It's really good. It talks about all kinds of trauma, how it's related back to keeping our patients warm. Um, Even on some of the hotter days or nicer days, keeping our patient warm is huge. What that will do will really help with the clotting process, the lactic acid buildup and acidosis levels in our patient's blood, and that results in a lot of decreased heart performance. That's all this little triad of trauma. So it just keeps going in a full circle all the time. And each one of them is actually really detrimental to the other. So it's just a continued cycle of circling the drain. And it all leads back to one of the best things we can do for our patient is keeping them warm. If they're going to be in there for a little bit of time, keep them warm, get a blanket on them, get a jacket on them, whatever we can do. The amount of patients that show up in an emergency room hypothermic almost is shocking how many do. And it's the one thing we can do as first responders, because we can't, not depending on your level of care, there's not a lot we can do outside of the extrication part, but a good initial access and assessing our patient, dealing with all these different levels. Think about the level of consciousness, the ABCs, the simple stuff, right? Keep a good thought of time in your mind and keep our patients warm. That's some of the best stuff we can do for them. Okay, we'll keep moving. We're on to our D, right, which is our disentangle and de-energize. So disentangle, I look at this as, they said, this has to deal with our entrapment. So once we get someone inside the vehicle, whether it be a firefighter, medic, or there's multiple people involved inside the vehicle, we want to also, not only, car and park, take out the keys, e-brakes, do your internal stabilization, make sure everything's safe, but start thinking about your entrapments and any major bleeds. Communicate with your IC what you got. And huge thing, and I've had this happen at a few scenes and it's worked really well, is just start creating space. Once, especially if you have multiple people in there, one's working on patient survey, the other one's creating space. And after you've identified with your IC how you want to get your patient out of the vehicle or what the plan is, start creating that space. Start finding a way to make that space from your end. Don't expect everyone on the outside to be doing all the work. Think about the little things you can do, like seat belts, get them off. Nothing worse than someone removing a roof or just about to get a patient out and seat belts still on them. Seat backs, make sure they're down. Or, depending on the situation, but more than likely you want to get them down, and coordinate that well with your medic. Steering wheel tilt and telescopic. I mean, it can turn a leg or pelvis entrapment into almost nothing if literally all we do is tilt and telescope the steering wheel out of the way, and seat backs, move the seat back. How often do we just forget that it's like, well, we can just put the seat back 6 inches because this car is designed to do that and this person sits really close. So just keep that really simple thought in mind, is that do these little things, right? And patient packaging. Then once you're done making all this space, don't just stop there. Start thinking about how we're going to get them out. Is it just going to be ripping them out? Are we got webbings? Are we going to girth hitch them? Are we going to create some type of sling? Are we using KEDs? Do we use scoops? Are we got boards? It depends on what you use with your departments, right? So I'm not going to tell you how to get them out that way, but there is many different options. So just think about that when you're working on the inside. When we talk about disentangle, it talks about getting the entrapments figured out and then start finding a way to get them out of the vehicle from your end, right? Try to start facilitating what the exterior crews can do. Next is de-energize on that side. And the reason why I kind of put these together is a lot of the stuff we talked about there is A lot of them needs 12-volt power. So don't initially always disconnect our 12-volt power. Um, when you get into high voltage vehicles, it gets a little bit different. Um, High voltage disconnect cut loops. For first responders, when we disconnect the high voltage system, it does not disable the 12-volt system. Luckily, we still have that ability. So just think about that. And I'm not saying every vehicle on the market is the same, but most of the major manufacturers, 12-volt will still stay live even when you do the first responder cut loop. So think about that as, okay, we can still isolate our high voltage power, but we can still access our 12-volt power, which will be our steering wheel, tilt and telescopic, things like that, right? So, but on new modern, on vehicles maybe that aren't high voltage, when you cut that 12-volt, you lose everything. So just remember that. That's why disentangle, de-energize kind of go hand in hand, and that's why disentangles first, is identify those little things that you can do with power before you kill your power. Airbag covers, sorry, I spelled that one wrong. Airbag covers, you're gonna be in there for a while. You guys do have airbag covers, put them on. If you're got multiple people working the vehicle, put the airbag covers on. It's usually just a steering wheel cover that goes on. It's just something to protect our patient and us if we're dealing with anyone inside. Just think about those long duration events, right? 12-volt battery, but locate and isolate. Sometimes there's multiple batteries, so just remember that some of these higher end vehicles, they do have multiples around. So you make sure you're identifying all of them, and disconnect them. Always disconnecting our negative first, then our positive. Just simple stuff, right? Back to basics approaches with the high voltage fuses with our electric vehicles. Make sure we're identifying those. How do you identify them? It's a lot of different ways. Owner's manuals. If someone's got a phone on scene, look it up. It's always online. NFPA has their own guides. You can look on through NFPA. Moditech is actually I don't even know if I'm saying that one right either, but they've got a really good app and they keep it pretty updated. It is at a cost, but if your department's looking for something, things like that, they are really good with not only just where the high voltage hookups are, but all the SRS systems are all identified in these things. So use what you have on scene. But like I said, don't forget everyone's got a phone in their pocket, right? So think about things like that, identify and de-energize, but make sure we make our interior space before we do that. We'll get into, this is kind of an idea. This is of an interior space. They've used a ram for some cross ramming to create some space with the roof down. The roof was obviously impinging possibly a patient's head. So not only were they able to get the seat backs to create a little more space, but they were also to ram it out to kind of probably create some interior space and make the overall opening a little bit bigger. But just little thought, like just get the seat backs. Even I love how this one is, they take the headrests off. If the headrests come off, get them out of the way. They're a pain in the butt and they're pretty easy to get off. If they don't come off, bolt cutters work. I don't suggest a lot of sawzalls because right near the patient's head, not the greatest idea. But things like a bolt cutter, even if you cut the one with the actual locking mechanism on it, you can actually cut that one, and the other one will just spin and come right out. So just think about things like that, right? Just little things that we can do to create space for our patient on the inside, right? This is back to our to our identification of our vehicles. I just want to touch on this real quick. Mainly, I have these three up here. Probably some of our most common ones we're going to see are Prius. I've got a Chevy Bolt, and I've got Tesla Model 3. The reason why I want to bring up the Model 3 in this one is that they don't identify with EV anymore or anything in terms of hybrid or whatever. They don't have to, because Tesla's solely an electric vehicle manufacturer. So just get used to that, because there's a lot of car companies that are coming out now that are saying that's all we're doing. So in 10, 15 years, just think about that, that's where we're getting to, is that don't always just look for a sign that says EV or high voltage. You need to know your vehicles. A great point is that, as I was working the other day, one of our newest recruits, not newest, about a year on, he made a great point. And I said, well, that's a weird looking Hyundai. I think it was one of those Konas, a Hyundai Kona, and it's a full EV now, right? Every year these companies are coming out with different models. So you got to kind of keep up on that game a little bit. So just keep your eyes peeled. You're driving around or someone brings something up around the hall, just keep your ears open and your eyes peeled, because there's lots of these new ones coming out that they're not really being identified, or maybe you always assumed for many years that, it's like the Honda Civic. You just assumed for many years it's just a gasoline motor. Well, then all of a sudden they came out with a hybrid for a few years, and then it went away. And so it's, you kind of have to keep up with these. So don't just assume right away that you're going to get identification. You might have some of these Teslas that don't even mark them anymore. They just assume that because they have that T on there, that's enough to get them by. So just keep that idea in mind too as well. This is our last part of our size up. This is our extricate and evaluate our plan. Obviously, like we talked about earlier, communicate with your interior firefighter medic, identify the best pathway. Like I said, your orientation is huge. Find out how they're situated in the vehicle, what their injuries are, entrapment levels, what's the best way to get them out, right? It's a two-part system. The IC is in charge, but the medic is really needs to dictate where we're going to go with this. And I keep saying medic, but I think it's whether it be a medic or a firefighter on the inside, they really need to kind of help us out. They're your eyes and your ears on the inside, so you really got to listen to them. How much time do you have? We're going to touch on that in a second in terms of different levels of how to dictate where you want to classify your patient. Keeping it simple, back to basics approach. But the newer vehicles, we've got to keep it simple. Doing a lot of these fancy moves that we've seen in the past 10 years are kind of going by the wayside. So we got to keep it very simple. We'll talk about that in a minute too as well. This in evaluating our plan. So have multiple plans. Don't always just think of the one way is always the best way. Multiple plans mean not just for the resistance you might meet on plan A, but also what's your plan when the patient crashes? What's our emergency evacuation plan? What's my evacuation plan for my medic and firefighters in the inside? So think about those things too as well. It's not just, the metal's giving, this part of the vehicle is giving me a hard time. It's make a plan not only for that, but make a plan for our patient and how we're going to deal with them when they do move from one level of our spectrum and time to another, or they crash on us. So, and like you said, that internal time clock, keep it in mind. How long did it take you to get there? Maybe you have a scene where it did take you a while to get there. Maybe it took you an extra few minutes to get down an embankment to a car. You got to add that into your time, right? That's all time that they've been in the vehicle, right? Don't forget about that, right? And as an IC, or whoever's in charge, whether you're the safety or whatever, don't get too involved. Step back. This is one thing that was always hard for me to do, working on a heavy rescue to going into more of a captain role the odd time was, and not only just on the job, but with our extrication teams, is trying to get yourself removed from the situation. It's really hard. You always want to get your hands in on things, but it's really important to step back and have an overall look at what's going on. You're doing yourself no good by being halfway in the vehicle. It's okay to kind of go in, communicate with your medic, get a quick idea what's going on, and then make it your point, put your hands behind your back, step back out, and have another look at what's going on. So don't get too involved. Okay, we'll get into time. Time itself is, like I said, it's very important. It's that internal time clock, but this kind of gives you a quick idea in terms of how to identify it right away. We'll start with the easiest and probably most common is our self-extricate, right? So that's kind of our green area. This is like our COVID coloring, I guess we could talk about it a little bit, is we've got it's driver assisted, or whether it be we're assisting them out of the vehicle. Maybe as simple as popping the door off and getting them out, but they're self-extricating. You're going to see more and more of this happen because some of the studies that are going on with C-spine precautions around, not just Canada, North America, but around the world, is that patient questioning and how we deal, so when you see medics, train with medics, ask them questions. Don't always assume, when you see a medic walking someone out of a vehicle that looks like this, they're like, oh man, what are they doing? Remember, they've got a whole different C-spine precaution questions that they go through that are, that dictate whether patients should walk out of a vehicle. Sometimes a patient is a lot better off walking out than 3 or 4 firefighters wrenching them out strapped to a board. The amount of force and the amount of the attention that we can apply to a patient is pretty exponential. So just remember, self-extricate is not always a bad thing. It's a good thing for us. So that's our first one. Self-extricate, urgent, less than 20 minutes. That's kind of our next level. We've got some time. To work. We got some time to make a plan. Something like pop a few doors, get a roof off, whatever we may do. But this is a sliding scale either way, right? Next is our rapid, less than 5 minutes. They're unconscious. they've got a deteriorating condition. Like I said, they might have started in the yellow urgent, and now they're in an orange, where they're like, okay, well now they, the medic or the firefighter says, hey, they're not doing good anymore. They were answering questions, now they're not answering questions anymore, or they're kind of rambling on, or they just, or they may have lost consciousness, right? So those are the things that you got to keep an eye on. You can go from one to another, but that your wrap is less than 5 minutes. That's when you don't want to get to work quick. You got to get a door open, get something, make a hole, and get them out. You may have to pull them out in a different manner than you want, but the idea of the plunger on the head and trying to keep them in line is kind of going out the window now, right? We're starting to think about just getting them out. Immediate, that's life threatening. That's VSA, fire conditions. So situation where we got to get them out right away. That's pretty straightforward. But just remember, these are just simple guidelines from our self-extricate, less than 20, less than 5, and life threatening right away. So it's pretty simple, but like I said, just keep in mind that there's no one spot to keep your patient. They can slide from one to another real quick. So you got to keep contact with your medic and your firefighters working on the inside. So that's our time. Like I said, it's very important. That's why I kind of brought that one up first. After our plans, we've kind of moved away from the size up now. We're going to dive right into some more just real quick, what's going on in the AutoX world, really general stuff, but also, if you need more info, always feel free to contact me, or, start diving in, start looking into this stuff, because it's changing so much. Alternative fuel sources. So we're seeing them everywhere. Hybrids, full electric vehicle, assisted electric vehicle is another one, and propane and hydrogen. Obviously, our full EVs are what we're seeing a lot of now more than anything, and our hybrids. Hybrid's a pretty simple system. It's, you've got an electric battery internally in the vehicle that is charged by a gasoline, or sorry, that's not charged, it's charged externally, right? Just like with our full EVs, right? So you basically plug it in, it's charged, it's ready to go. When you start running out of a charge, not running out of a charge, but basically your battery in a hybrid is used for a lot of your slower speeds, and you're stopping and starting. When you get into higher speeds, a lot of times your gasoline engine will kick in, and that can change from manufacturer and year to year. They're always tweaking with the hybrid motors. Full electric vehicle, pretty straightforward, simple plug-in. Those are your Teslas, those are your Chevy Bolts. You get into assisted. The reason I bring up assisted electric vehicles, it's a little bit different. And this is a snapshot here of, or an overhead view of a Chevy Volt, not a Bolt, but a Volt. So I don't know if anyone remembers the Volt. I don't even think they're making them anymore. And I'm actually kind of surprised, because it was kind of an intriguing idea. Is what they did was, car manufacturers were allowed to, rebates for many years with the government. In some places, they still do allow it. And in order to do that, you had to classify yourself as a full electric vehicle, not a hybrid. So these assisted electric vehicle ideas started coming out. So just have an eye out for them, because how they work is they have an engine generator on the side. So everything runs off your electric drive unit. So let's say you've got 190 kilometers roughly on your battery charge, right? What happens is when this starts to die down, your engine acts kind of like just like a Honda generator, really, that you'd have plugged in, and it just fires up and it starts charging up the batteries, which in turn gets drawn by your electric motor. So it was a different kind of idea, and that's how they got into this whole classifying an electric vehicle. I'm actually surprised they don't stick around Canada more, because in colder climates these things don't always act the way we want them to, some of the batteries. So having an assisted electric vehicle, you think that would be something that, when you start running out of power, it's nice to have that generator in the back to know it's going to be there to help you. Propane and hydrogen. Propane's out there quite a bit. It's a conversion kit that a lot of people put on vehicles. It makes it a little bit cheaper sometimes, but the big thing with propane is just identifying. Like we talked about earlier about popping trunks and finding out where they are, because man, the last thing you need is propane. You don't need a Bellevue situation, when you get into a car fire. So you got to identify these things the best we can. Or if we're going to be doing things like trunk tunneling or accessing through a trunk somehow, we got to know what we're pushing off of with our tools. If we've got a propane cylinder kicking around there, we got to really identify those things. Hydrogen is the same way. There's some few videos out there too. Hydrogen, man, that's like those things are a bomb going off if they start going fully. So just have an eye out for them. They're really not around. There's one, I believe there's a Hyundai Tucson. I think they sell it in British Columbia right now. And I could be wrong. It might be more out there coming. At least in Canada. I think that might be one of the only ones out there, hydrogen. Honda's got a Clarity model that's out there in California quite a bit. So these things are picking up steam. Electric is still kind of the main game and probably will be for a while. The idea behind hydrogen is just remember is that hydrogen still has batteries. It's still charging a battery system. So they're still going to have the presence of these batteries, right, somewhere in your vehicle. So just keep an eye out for that. So those are our alternative fuel sources, kind of the main ones. So this is just kind of a quick touch on them. Next, we'll get into some ultra high strength steel stuff. This is what's really changing what we're doing. Alternative fuels is one thing, but man, what they're putting inside of the vehicles is pretty unbelievable, and it sucks for us, but they're doing some really, really neat stuff. But so basically what happened is they're just making the steel stronger. So since the 80s, what they had is they had something called necking, and it was when some of the light metal deformed and when they tried to stamp it and whatnot. So they started trying to do these different things. So what they did is they brought out something called like interstitial free steel. And what that was just kind of a single phase iron steel. And it was a lot lighter weight. But the problem was it just wasn't, it avoided this necking, this deformation. But what happened was that because it was ultra lightweight, it had very, very little strength properties. So that's where ultra and advanced high strength steels come in. So this is a cutout of a Tesla. So this is, gives you an idea of what we've got. So the red, if you can't see the writing, the red is your ultra high strength steel. Your yellow is your high strength steel. And then you have your mild, which is your blue, and aluminum is, and with a lot of these vehicles, aluminum makes up a lot of the body parts of it. It doesn't make up the structural. So things like Tesla, a lot of the doors and everything are made of aluminum. So just remember that too, that in terms of what you're cutting and when you're dealing with the vehicle itself and, pushing and prying and things like that, is aluminum, it fractures a lot differently. It makes a really, really aggressive sound. So just be careful with that. Is that a lot of these high strength steels do the same thing, is that they really do fracture and break, and they don't cut like we used to. So just remember that when you're making these moves and you're just about to get through a piece of metal, just brace for that, because it can be very aggravating to your patient and can be kind of surprising to everyone on scene if you don't see it coming. So the big thing with ultra high strength steel is just know what you have on the inside, know that it's coming, and where it can be found. Every vehicle is going to be different, but just understand that the ultra high strength steels are not just in the B pillars anymore, they're everywhere. As you can see with this one, what they've done is, because there's no engine anymore as part of our patient protection, and a lot of the engines are designed to drop out of the bottom of the vehicles anyways on collision. That's why you see them usually laying on the road somewhere. That's what they're designed to do, right? It takes up part of your patient protection level. Well, they don't have those engines anymore in these electric vehicles. So now we've moved into having to really strengthen up the front of our vehicles with this high strength steel right in the bumper areas. So this whole, trying to do a dash lift with all these relief cuts that it's going to take a really long time. So keep that in mind, right? As well as just along the floor pan there, if you see the red and the blue that are running around there, but the red is the more important part. The reason why this is here, and it's going to be on different areas in different vehicles because of where they put the battery, that's where the battery is on the Tesla, is that whole floorboard. So that's why they have high strength steel and ultra high strength steel running through the bases of these, right? So just keep that in mind, right? And ultimately, it's not just for patient safety. So everyone says, well, they're doing this, it's for patient safety. This is multifaceted why they're doing this. And that's why it's changing so rapidly. There's so many different types of ultra high strength steel. We can get into that, but it's a whole other day. And the whole idea though behind them is that it's all about fuel economy and weight reduction, right? More than anything. And like everyone wants to pass the safety test and do best. And that's what's awesome, right? But really when it comes down to it as well, is a lot of governing bodies all over North America, especially in Europe, they're trying to get the weight down in these vehicles because they need to meet fuel emissions. And to meet fuel emissions, you need a lighter vehicle. So lighter steel with still the high strength will get you patient safety, and will also get you weight reduction, and will also get you your fuel economy that you need, right? And then, like you said, battery protection is big too. So this is why you're seeing it everywhere. So like on this next one, this is also the same Tesla as well, or a similar Tesla. So just keep in mind, and I had the same problem. We cut up a Ford Edge a while ago at the Ford plant one day, and we ran into the same problem, is that it's not just our B pillars that we're running into this. So everyone's like, well, you just avoid the B pillar, we'll cut the roof, or we'll do something like that. These roof rails front to back, they are totally, a lot of them have boron that runs right through them, or some type of rod or reinforced steel. And like I said, multiple layers of steel are coming on top. So it's not just this base layer, they're going to put another layer, and then they're going to put another layer. So it's getting tougher for us. So just keep that in mind, that, don't just, you can't always avoid some of these bigger, chunkier B pillars. Sometimes you're going to have to go right through them, and you're going to have to find a way to get through them a little bit better, right? Because going after the roof is not only is it reinforced and it's got all this strength in it, it's also now littered with SRS systems and airbag inflation cylinders. So sometimes just going straight at the side of the vehicle here is something to keep in mind, right? Another one, so this is a good example. This is another the photo, not mine, obviously, but this is a great depiction here, and I believe this was a Dodge Caravan on the left-hand side with the boron rod through it, the thicker one on this side here, and this was a Tesla. So it just gives you an idea that they're both, totally different types of vehicles and totally different price range. But at the end of the day, they both got something in there. But the bigger thing to take from that too is that this was, I believe, in 2000, 2007, 2010, somewhere in their model year of the Caravan. Think about the size of that boron rod, and now this is a fairly new Tesla on the other side here. Just look at how much thinner this is. It just goes back to us talking about the reduction in weight and the introduction of new steel, is that this is quite a bit stronger than this is. This is still strong, but look what they've done in weight reduction. So it's still there. It doesn't mean that it's not stronger. It's just sizes and everything now, right? So these new high strength steels really change our thought on that. I got something real get into here. Before we get into that, I'm gonna bring up something real quick in terms of, see if I can get it out here for you guys here. This is some of the Tesla stuff. I'll see if I can get it up here and play for you guys. Hopefully you can see it okay and everything. Anyone thumbs up? Everyone see this okay? Okay, perfect. So this is a little bit of the Teslas and how they crash test them. We'll just play a little bit through them. I'm not gonna do the whole vehicle, but it just gives you an idea of, they are putting a massive amount of speed and they're hitting some pretty solid stuff, and they're coming out and they're just bouncing. So the high strength steel is pretty amazing, but it just shows you what we're going to be up against if we have to go through it. So just keep it in mind. All right, so we'll get into some of this stuff. All right, so I'm gonna run through the whole thing because it could take quite a bit of time there too as well. So we'll get back, but I just want to give you an idea. It kind of gives you a quick idea of side impact, especially front impact at the end too. We talked about them not even really having the engine in there anymore to protect the patient as part of that there. So the addition of that high strength steel in the front, the front of those vehicles is getting so strong, because, and you saw it, like, they hold up pretty well. And that's not just Teslas, that's everyone's doing it. Like I said, Ford's doing it, GM's doing it, they're all doing it. They are not the only ones. So just have an eye when you're out there, start identifying some of this stuff. And this is why plan Bs are so important, and creating, interior space is important, because if we can just create just a small enough opening and get some of our patients out, sometimes that's the best we're going to do against some of these new vehicles, right? We'll get into something called preloading. I did an article a while ago back, not too long ago, with a fellow from the East Coast somewhere. I can't really remember his name. But Preloading is directly involved with high strength steel. So I won't keep it in mind. Actually, this is a Jason DeFoss tip that I kind of learned along the way, and it really made a lot of sense to me, and it kind of stuck with me. So what preloading is what we're doing is applying a lot of tension to our high strength steel before we're making our cuts. You're loading up that steel before to aid in its cut. So this is kind of a decent picture here. You don't see the top end of the ram. What they're doing is the top end of the ram is into the A post, and what's been done here is obviously the front door has been removed. We've identified a footwell entrapment, and we are in a 20-minute scenario where we know we've got some time. So we're going to do a dash push here. What they've done here is they've preloaded the they basically preloaded this A pillar by pushing it off with the ram. So not only is that going to reduce, it's going to actually reduce a little bit of the strength. It's going to apply a tension to that steel. So it'll be a little bit easier for our cutters to kind of make that initial cut. So that's what kind of preloading is trying to provide those, those tension situations to our steel before we cut. Not only is it about preloading, but it's also like it's fostering that whole idea of the fracture and breaking, like we talked about. The new steel, it's not gonna cut. It's just gonna break on us violently a lot. So there's a lot of retention in that strength. So when you cut that bottom A pillar or you cut a B pillar, a lot of the time there's a reaction to that as well. So by pre-tensioning that, it could be the same as when you cut the top of a B pillar. If you do a window spread with your spreaders and then cut the top of your B post, there's another idea of preloading because you're actually tensioning that high end of your B post. So it'll actually weaken that steel a little bit, make it a little bit easier for our cutters to get in there. And also it'll kind of help us from that resistance. So when that steel wants to kind of crush back to where it originally was, it's going to capture some of that, right? So it's for patient safety reasons in a situation like this too, having the ram tensioned in place already. If we decide to cut some, the bottom A post here, rather than having that dash want to collapse down, we're actually capturing it with our preloading. So we're creating not only an easier situation by preloading our high strength steel for cuts, but we're also creating a level of patient safety. So when we are dealing with some of the new vehicles out there, just remember that this is something that you can keep in mind is preload your cuts with your spreaders or your rams. It's going to give you a little bit of help, and it's actually going to control the steel rather than for it to violently break and do something that maybe you don't want it to do, right? Upgraded SRS systems and safety systems. Airbags, obviously, they're everywhere. They're more prevalent. Seatbelts, you've seen them in seatbelts now. They're actually, they're in the hoods to protect the, someone, a pedestrian walking down the street. They're actually putting them in the hoods of vehicles now, so it'll protect them. So they're everywhere, right? They're along your roof lines. They're in your shin area, so they're underneath the steering wheel to protect that those shin injuries, in front end collisions. They put them in between passengers now. You'll see, I don't know if everyone's seen the video from a while back with all the patients not buckled in properly, and they all start banging around inside the vehicle, and most of them end up killing each other just from impact inside the vehicle. So you're starting to see these airbags even put inside the vehicle to keep the driver and passenger away from each other, right? So just think about that and we talked about it with the high strength steel talk, is identify what you have before you make any cuts. Always peek and pry, always have a good idea where things are, and don't just identify where the airbags are. You need to know where the airbag cylinders are, and just be careful too. If you don't see an airbag cylinder, there's a good chance they might actually wrap it in the airbag. So keep that in mind when we're starting to make roof cuts, and that's why I think, not saying don't do roof cuts or full roof removals, but just if you're going to do a full roof removal on an SUV or a van, that's a lot of cuts, and that's a lot of peek and pry you're going to have to do. So just keep that in mind as well too, right? Just little things. I said, expose, identify, and address them. It's just, like I said, a lot with airbags, passenger safety. Laminated glass is now a big thing too. The big thing to touch with laminated glass is it's not new to us. It's in the front and rear of pretty much a lot of the vehicles now. The big thing with laminated glass is find out where else it is. And now they're trying to put it, well, not they're trying to, it's actually mandated now for a lot of the manufacturers now, is that they're putting it on every window. So if you have something, I mean, every company's coming out with a way to cut these out with whether it be a Rhino tool, or there's other brands that you can hook onto the end of a power drill, like a Beluga, I think they call them. I said there's so many different ones out there, but start researching. If you don't have these products on your truck, make sure you start getting them, because they're starting to put laminated glass on every vehicle or every window in the vehicle. But also remember, right now this is still a transitional phase. So a lot of the same time we were cutting those forward edges up, for an example of that was the passenger and driver windows were laminated. When you got to the rear windows, the back seat, they were all tempered still. So just because you have one doesn't mean they're all going to be like that. So they're put in place for patient safety. They're put in place so we don't have issues with ejections, things like that. It's designed for patient safety, so ejections, but also how the airbags respond. Having those windows in place helps with patient safety, because it hand in hand works well with the airbags. So think about how you're going to remove those. Sometimes the best way to do that is literally just make a cut along the bottom of the window where it meets the door, and you pull out, and it releases entirely, because the window's not attached to the entire sash. It's just attached to where it comes out of the door. So make just one cut along the bottom and pull it out and drop it down. That's a lot less glass dust. Those you don't want to have to cut that stuff. If you don't have to cut it, don't cut it. If you are, make sure you're wearing N95, some type of facial protect or respiratory protection, because the glass in there is it's awful for us. So keep that in mind before we do remove it. Does it need to be removed? Equal and opposite reaction, right? So just think about that kind of stuff. But it is out there, but identify it. How do you identify it? Sometimes it's usually the best way to look is it's usually in the corner of the glass. It'll say Lama Safe or some type of laminated. If it's not, next way is you try your window punch, try it again, try someone else's window punch. If it ain't working, that's probably laminated glass, right? So now we're gonna have to address it with a specialty tool, right? Seatbelt pretensioners, they're nothing new to us. They're everywhere too as well. Seatbelt pretensioners, this is one right in the middle. This is located at the base of a B pillar. Just think about what you're cutting. This is why you want to avoid these things. Obviously, you don't want to cut these. It's not so much the spool itself. You want to stay away from the charge. And sometimes the charge is not on the bottom like this. Sometimes it's located on these actual sides of, and you'll be able to tell because you'll see the wire. There's usually a yellow wire or something like that running out of them. So just keep that in mind. That's the stuff you want to stay away from, because that's where these little inflation cylinders are. But obviously, if you can avoid these altogether, avoid them. Cut above or below if you can. Sometimes they're located on the interior side of the seat too as well. So just keep looking for these things, identify, right, address them. Inflation cylinders, there's one over here too as well, the inflation cylinders. The big thing with these is same idea. Think about it as like a pop can. There is a charge in here, and these things will go a very far distance if they are compressed and cut. If you have to cut one of these, I mean, obviously you don't want to. You want to avoid them the best we can. If you got to cut them, use a Sawzall. What that'll do is it'll release the charge out of the first initial cut. Whereas something like a hydraulic cutter will actually compress it and make that charge, and it'll just explode on you, right? So just think about those things. Avoid it if you can, but there are ways to address these, right? It doesn't mean that they can't be cut. Just be careful, right? And use the right tool. This is just a different type of airbag we're dealing with. This is a sunroof airbag, right? So they're just everywhere. So just remember, like the roof used to be an easy game to cut through, right? Roofs were Sawzall. Everyone loved using a Sawzall or an air chisel on a roof, and there's a lot of stuff in the roof now, and the amount of supports they have to put in them now just to make up for these panoramic sunroofs. It's not only is it an airbag issue, but there's a lot of good steel structural support in some of these roofs. So just remember that too as well when we're addressing them, right? It's not always an easy option. With all this, after talking about the size up and the high strength steel and the SRS systems, really what we need to start thinking about is our back to basics approach. Really, I look at this like kind of a door by door approach. Some of these newer high strength steel, we can't really do a lot of the full side rips and the door fold downs, the bat wings, however you want to call them. There's a lot of different terminology out there and different things you'll see on YouTube from different people. But some of these fancy moves, they're not going to work anymore a lot with these high strength steel, especially in the B pillars. They using your spreader or your ram to push off a base of a B pillar with one relief cut, it's a really, really tough task to get after. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying don't try it, and I'm not saying it's never going to work, but it's really tough. So keep it very simple. Get back to the door by door approach. Reason being is identifying our trapments and what we have and creating that initial emergency access point for our patient. So if we take the front door first, if it's a driver or a passenger on the side, you take the front door first, identify what you have, and if they crash on you, we've got an easy pull out and grab and go, right? If there's no point in me starting from the rear door and doing a full side removal on a patient who's trapped in the front seat, and by the time I get up there I realize there's footwell entrapment. It doesn't work well for us. So if they crash on us, we need to have that quick out. So think about getting that initial door open where a patient is, so we can have that point, right? Hinge attacks versus nader bolts, it doesn't matter. Give what the car, read your rec. If you've got a good way to go from the nader bolt, if the crash opens up a good purchase point there, then go after it. If it goes to the hinges, take the hinges, whatever works best. You're going to hear 100 different ways from 100 different people, right? Is that everyone's got a sweet spot, what they like best. But if you're taking a door and you're creating a purchase point, hinge attacks, work in tandem with your cutters and spreaders, and that's with your naders too. When you attack from the nader is, work from the top and work your way down. Top side, you can usually spread those, the hinges or the naders off really good, but use your spreaders in combo with them. Don't just have one tool sitting there, have your next one right beside it, or have someone there standing with it, because if you're struggling, you want that cutter in there. Or if you just got enough space to get that nader pin with the cutter, then do it. Same with the top side hinge. If you can pop that top side hinge, then bring your cutter in for the bottom side hinge, right? And then get your spreaders back on the other side of the door where the nader pin is, so you can drop it off. So you're working in these tandem groups together. So, when you're doing your training, think about that, right? Is, work together, back and forth, right? Always kind of supplement each other, right? Not only to help if you're in trouble, but also to make that, to make that work a little bit easier for you with the hinge removal. Go for the top, then take the bottom with the cutter. B posts to become massives. Sometimes a good 3-phase approach. I learned this from a guy, I think down in Florida one time or whatever, but a good approach too with some of these bigger B posts is come in perpendicular to your B post and make just one big cut right at the bottom of the B post, and then make 2 other cuts, one in the front, one in the rear, to finish it off. Because some of these B posts are just massive. You can have some of the biggest cutters on the market, and you're still going to struggle with it. So you can make an initial purchase on the front, the very front side facing of your B post. You're going to be in a lot better shape. And what you're also going to do is create a weak point in the steel. So when you do make that front cut and then the rear cut with your cutters on the B post, your tool swing will come towards that initial cut we made, right? It's not going to generally go right into our patient. So you're going to make not only the attacking the B post a little bit easier, but you're also going to, you're going to control your tool swing as well. As I said, we talked about with the Tesla pictures, A posts are becoming stronger. Dash displacements, it's not that easy to do anymore. If you look up no relief dash lifts, there's some really good stuff out there, maybe Facebook, YouTube. Think about some of these things. I think one of the biggest things that with dash reliefs is you'll see is that some people do some really extreme dash lifts, and I think it was Torrance Lee on Facebook. He did some really good stuff, and he made a really good point once, and he said, with dash displacements, you got to remember is that how many times do we do extrication training, or you see stuff online where the front end was crushed originally, right? Like a lot of the times you're doing them on pretty stable, pretty much, not brand new cars, but cars that have just been wrecked, right? They're not high end impact on the front end. So we're not trying to create 1.5 feet of lift. What we're trying to do is almost get back to just lifting that dash just a few inches to get it back to maybe where it was when the car first started, right? Is make that just enough space to get them out, right? So just think about that. So having to make 4 or 5 dash relief cuts and have to take fenders off all the time, it's not saying it's not the way to go. Know how to do it, but just remember that with some of the newer stuff out there, it's pretty strong, and you're gonna be met with a lot of resistance with those relief cuts. So just keep that in mind when you start thinking about your time clock and your internal time clock. Those things take time. So just get in some no relief dash stuff is very important. And like I said, reading your rec. Avoid that comfort zone. Get out of the fact of just saying we do roof removals, we do full side removals. That's what we do, or we do seat pillar blowouts, or whatever you want to call them. Get out of that comfort zone of just having a few different moves. Read your patient, understand what's going on, read the rec. What is it giving you? What's the patient orientation, and what is the rec telling you in terms of where's the best place to attack this, right? So, get away from that simple, straightforward idea, right? This is just some simple picks of attack from the top stuff, tracking from a vertical position. The one on the left with the tool just by itself is kind of a good example of some preloading. You're kind of preloading any high strength steel you may have in terms of now, okay, if you need to make an A pillar cut or a B pillar cut, you're going to control a lot of that reaction, as well as you're going to create some space interior for your patient by creating this window spread. You've created another 4 or 5 inches on the inside of that vehicle for your patient, if they do have any side intrusion. So those are some different ideas of preloading, and then the other one is more of an attack from the top position, right? You're not only is it more beneficial in terms of how the door is going to handle, and like you said, whether you're going to work in tandem with your cutters, but the weight of the electric tools are heavier. There's no way getting around that. They'll make them lighter every year. They're doing an amazing job, but they are pretty big and heavy. And I'm not a big guy, and you can struggle with some of these things, especially after a few minutes of using them. So if you tack from more of a vertical position, it doesn't have to be entirely as vertical as this, but if you come in more of a vertical angle, it's going to give you a better spread and more of a kind of a better tunneling that you can do. But you're also going to, once that tool takes hold, the weight of the tool is now off you. It's now on the vehicle, right? So you're really just controlling the tool motion and the opening and closing. The actual weight of it is being taken up by your vehicle. So think about that in terms of how you want to talk about tool handling, right? Especially with the new battered tools, right? We'll get into just building your program real quick. That's they were kind of getting towards the end here. This is just more, I put this in because this is how I got into this. And if some of the bigger departments, they have the luxury of having a better training program or a campus or ability to purchase vehicles. But just remember that we don't all have that. It doesn't mean that you can't branch out and do other things. I started through the extrication competitions through Turk. So just remember that these organizations are out there. If you ever need any info, you can always email me. I've got my email address up at the end. As I said, you can always ask me anything, how to reach out to some of these organizations. There's Turk, there's NAVRA, there's the WRO, which is the World Rescue Organization. Look them up. They've got some really good stuff out there and some good programs, and there's a ton of learning that goes on between everyone. This is where I learned everything, the majority of where I learned everything, or at least got introduced to a lot of it. But also reach out locally. We use some good records in our town too, and from a team standpoint, it's worked out really well. But from a department standpoint, if you don't have the facilities or the cars, reach out to your wreckers, especially if you go to their site. A lot of the times, they're really, really good, and they love to smash them up for you. So there's some really good relationships to be built and to work with. So it'll give you a ton of different options in terms of training. So don't just close the door to say, well, because AutoX is really easy to get pushed to the back burner, but the reality is that with the amount of vehicles on the road today and the population increases in some of our cities, and it's just a matter of time. It's just going to keep going up and up. It can easily get pushed to the back burner, but let's not forget it's really important, and it opens up another door in terms of rescue, right? It really does. So and third-party extrication training, there's lots of them out there. I'm not going to name names or companies or whatever, but there are some pretty decent ones. If you ever need stuff, like I said, I'm more of a Rolodex than an expert, right? So if you ever need something, just feel free to reach out. I can try to steer you the right way. In terms of other things, they say just keep your minds open. Tools are great and everything. Some of the other stuff there's a couple real things. First one's out from Calgary, I believe. It's a guy named Randy Schmitz. He put this up, and he's pretty good too. And it's just a couple quick videos. This is just using stuff to think outside of the box. I just kind of want to close on a few of these things. They're using a hijack here and a couple struts on the other side with some shovels, and just some different ways to move a vehicle. It's just interesting. kind of just some different ideas there. One more quick one. This is the same idea using a hijack and a sawzall. There's some different ideas in terms of you're on a scene where you don't have, or maybe you have, this is mass casualty. You get a major highway wreck where you don't have tools right on hand. Maybe you got a hose reel that's attached to the vehicle or to your apparatus, and you can't get your tools where you need them. If you did have a battery power sawzall, you could work this, and a hijack works really well. This is not the way I planned this to go upside down on me. The intent of the idea is that we're using a hijack just like we would a spreader, and we're going to create a purchase point on the rear of our door here. So just this can be used on front door too as well. Sorry for the orientation here, but pretty straightforward stuff. But just different ideas, right? You can cut your back sash here. That'll help with your relief. So you'll see as we use the hijack, it'll actually open up our door for us. These are just things that, we didn't create this. This is just something that we learned along the way from other teams out there. And what we do is you basically get this to a point where we can get our sawzall in behind where the nader bowl is attached to the sheet metal. And we make a simple cut behind just almost a purchase cut and behind there. And once you can get that started, you kind of work in tandem with the operator work with the operator on the hijack, and it'll continue to rip away the nader pin until you can just cut it right away. So just some different ideas in terms of don't ever close the doors on some of the old hand tools too as well. Like I know we talked about high strength steels and some of the best electric tools out there and new stuff that's going on. But don't close the doors on some of the old stuff, because it's really, really important to learn. But that's why when you get back into some of these competition things and some of these training programs that are out there, they're great, and they're going to teach you a lot of this stuff. So some of the old school stuff that you don't want to forget about, right? So I think that's pretty much all I got. I went through most of the stuff with you. Questions? I mean, I don't know if anyone's got any questions. Don't open up the floor. Sorry, I talked a lot, so I know this probably took a long time here.
No, you didn't talk. It's all good. Anyway, a few things I'd like to touch on too. Again, I've been doing it for quite a few years too, and excellent job, Chad.
Thank you.
One thing that I did mention just before everybody else came on, I have a rule of 9, but with an actual extra. Any kind of tech rescue that I have, I walk in with this rule of 9. And first of all, it's taking a strong command, because I've seen individuals that where if you don't have a strong command, you're going to have a lot of evolution starting to happen on their own, and then efficiency gets lost and all that kind of thing. So having a strong command is definitely something that I make sure I establish. I've had on my time in the heavy rescue, I've had some pump captains come in and become our captain. They had that kind of mentality, kind of step back and let somebody else take over. So we didn't have success. Is identifying the rescue and recovery, number 2. All right, so that's going to determine how fast we have to get going into it. This is where I'll put in a 2A or 2B, is understanding that I have to do my and this has become very important to me because of a couple of trench rescues and another one, identifying your zones, making sure they are identified to the point now that we have a yellow tape for our warm zone, and we have to have red tape in order to keep, because firefighters are all A-type personalities. They all want to help. So in order to eliminate those people coming forward and then actually making it confusing as well. These are more for the bigger cases, but you want to make sure that you get those zones identified. And then quickly through the rest of them, hazard risk assessment, identifying the rescue objectives, identifying resource needs, developing your action plan, implementing the action plan, evaluate the action plan, and then terminating the incident. We don't talk nearly enough about that, because that's where people do get hurt. So anyway, that's my points that I like to go in for anything like that. Another thing is you were saying having 2 tools. Again, I'm we're lucky, you and I, being in pretty good staffing situations. I try to have my team not put their tool down.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
the cutters.
100%. Yeah.
And then that way it's just real quick. And again, I have lots of tools to choose from too. So I'm spoiled that way.
Yeah, no, it's 100% direct. Is that, you know, you kind of forget the luxury you may have, but you know, it's important to know what you have, but also don't, like I said, that's why I love showing the hijack stuff at the end. And is it's so important to remember what you have and what you can get. I mean, hijack's a couple $100. I mean, and I'm not saying that it's going to do the same trick, especially on some of the newer vehicles, but it's another tool that's out there. And you know, some of the smaller departments, or maybe departments that don't have the budget at the moment to do something, you know, there's stuff out there. So don't, you know, sawzalls, hijacks, air chisels, always great tools. So don't ever throw those off the truck, right? That's all I got to say about those.
Yeah, very good. And so I don't want to talk too much longer on much than that. Again, to everybody that just that missed the start, the Hogtown F.O.O.L.S is just going to be presenting these little snippets, let's just say, just so that we can get back to the kitchen tables and talk about something tomorrow morning. All right. And Chad's done a very good point, a very good presentation on Auto-X, and has brought a lot of information forward, and really appreciate that. And looking forward to chatting about this at the kitchen table tomorrow. This has been recorded, and with Chad's permission, I'll put it up on YouTube, and you guys can take it back to your halls too, and have a look at it. Okay. Any other questions for Chad?
Yeah, I'd like to say great job there, Chad. Sitting back here on the other side of the screen is unique. Excellent explanation of what you were doing. I loved it. You're a talented young guy. Love working with you, and great job here tonight. And you know, rescue is simple to me. It's rescue is a game of inches, angles, and an egress. If you let everything that you do result in more space for your patient and your medic, you can never go wrong. Great job, brother. Enjoyed watching you present tonight.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, and he said he's one of the guys. You know, he's one of those guys that, you know, that's what I said is these organizations we talked about at the end, and reaching out to whether it be manufacturers, getting into these competitions. It's important because this is where I meet these people that are showing me all this stuff. I'm not the expert here. I'm the Rolodex guy that, you know, I know there's a lot of info here and a lot thrown out in the last hour and a bit, but like you said, if anyone's got any questions, just feel to reach out. I can hopefully get you in the right direction to maybe something I can't answer. So you know, that's you know, I appreciate everyone watching and getting the feedback's been awesome.
Thanks, Chad. Looks like people are starting to tail off now. It's Sunday night, I understand.
Yeah, well, it's Sunday night. It's all good.
So with that, any other questions right now? I don't see anything coming up. A lot of way to go, Chads.
Perfect. Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Nice job, buddy.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it. Like I said, appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a lot, guys.
No problem. And again, for those that are still here, we'll be coming back on the 27th with Reading Smoke, back to basics presentation with one of our brothers from Hogtown, Steve Bull. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to say goodnight, Chad.
Perfect. Good night, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Nice and quick, and we'll get it done. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.